Hi, welcome to my new video on using my new glass shapes in a dream catcher. These are the glass shapes that I highlighted in my last video. You can see them here laid out on top of a drawing that is on top of a piece of clear silicone mat. So this is the video of those shapes when I foiled them. So using the clear silicone mat, it's really awesome because then you can put your nice circle array or whatever pattern you want to copy underneath the mat, and you can just use thumbtacks or pins through the silicone itself to hold it in place. For the wires on this project, I used 18 gauge and some 14 gauge tinned wire. And this wire I used was already pre-tinned. This way, if you use pre-tinned wire, that means it's already had a solder coat on it. Your patina will take to this, and you don't have to coat all your wires with solder when you're working. So if you want to keep your little wire loops and designs really nice and sharp, you might want to consider using tinned wire. That way you don't have to add solder on top of the wires. Now notice that I'm using the needle nose pliers that have round shafts. I like to use those at times and actually use that to make my little coils. So I'm using a flat needle nose at times, and I'm using the round ones. I'm also using different pens, anything I can find that's about the right diameter round to wrap around to help make nice symmetrically round spirals. And then I'm adjusting them somewhat. Now I'm going to be adding some crystals to this, and so that's why I have some kind of open circles so that later I can add the crystals. I'm trying to make different designs with this so that my final project doesn't have repeating swirlies. I like to have them all kind of different. These swirls I'm using will also help hold the glass shape, so it's kind of like an extra support. I also put wire around, using 18 gauge wire, bending that around all my exterior globs right there. That also will help them not fall off when you're working. So I like to get a pile of these little swirlies and then figure out where I want to put them. I'm using silicone washers, those reddish orange washers. That's really handy because it's raising the little wires to the height that I want them to be, and the solder won't stick to them. Right there is a very small crystal that I wrapped with foil, and I am now soldering just that crystal into that open loop. You can also watch my video on how to foil small objects, where I do foil small crystals and different size objects. So that would give you some pointers on doing that. Here is another really small crystal. This crystal is probably 8 to 10 millimeters in diameter. I usually don't like to have anything under 8 millimeters. I do use some 6 millimeters, but you can see right there, there's a crystal right there on the upper left between the two blue glass globs. And those crystals do need to get washed, they'd be shinier. So you can watch my video on adding crystals to stained glass. I like to use crystals all the time because they really pick up the light. So right here I have one of those large circles and I'm getting ready to add a crystal there. I have a crystal in my hand and I need to knock down a little solder glob. And so that crystal will fit in that spot very nicely. Right here I've turned my project over and I am now back soldering here and there. Sometimes you need to pick up your project, and this way if there's excess solder you can just kind of knock it off as you're filling any gaps in the solder. So the solder is really, really important to hold everything together because that's all there is that's holding it. So if you're making something, especially that's really airy like that, you want to make sure it's secure. Right here, I'm using Cadiz. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, but they're shells, and I foiled them, and now I am soldering them together. So right now I'm just touching up to hold them to the wire stem, and after this I will take them off the paper and solder the rest of it. I used tape underneath them so that they stay in place while I'm soldering and tacking them together. You can also watch a dedicated video on stained glass feathers made of Cadiz shells, and there I go into a little bit more depth of making these feathers and cutting the shells. Basically I do use a half of the width of the normal 7/32 inch foil and foil them on their edges after I've cut them out, and then I'm fluxing them and running a line of solder around everything. So even the feathers, you need to turn them over and solder the back of them. Especially in something like a dreamcatcher where the objects are going to be like kind of turning in the air. You know, you want to have the back to look just as good as the front. I'm using a flux that is not a liquid, it's kind of a gel flux, and I like using that because it tends to, I don't know, stay in place and not run off like a liquid flux. These are a bunch of my chain pieces that I created, and my next video is going to be on making wire chain links. So I'll be more explicit on how I made these and how I bent these to look really cute. So I have a bunch of hearts and a bunch of circles basically, and I need to solder the links so they don't fall apart. You may notice that the silicone mat that I have, I've been using it for a while, and there's a lot of stray flux on the mat, and so sometimes I can just solder without adding flux because there's so much sitting on the mat as it is. This is one of the words I made to hang from this, because it's Mike's wedding, and so I put their names, Mike and Tori's names, on it, and I'm soldering his name. I used the thicker 14 gauge for his name, and some of the wires I have are out of 18 gauge. I wanted thicker wire for their names because I didn't want any weight to pull the letters apart. So for the I just used a thinner wire and made a little I sticking up in the air. Now when you solder the links, you're going to want to leave a little bit of a glob wherever the solder is for the links. At least I usually do. So I'm real sure that they are indeed soldered. Not much, just a little bit. Yeah, you don't want to hold this wire with your fingers because it's so thin that you're heating it up a lot and it's going to be very hot. So even if it's not the heart you're working on, you don't want to touch it. Now when you have all your parts together, it's time for the patina. Make sure you wear gloves because patina is really not good for you. So you don't want to get it on your skin. So I'm putting all the parts on top of each other on a piece of plastic. I put the patina in a squirt bottle and I'm just squirting away. The reason I put them on top of each other is if there's any excess spray, I might as well get another part of my project black. And you don't have to patina it. I just really like the black look. So you can use a toothbrush to kind of help spread the patina in. Of course, you have washed your project in some kind of soap and water before you patina. Patina will not stick very well to flux, so you really want to wash your project quite well before. Yeah, some of that patina that is on the table there in puddles won't, if it's already fully activated, it's not going to activate anymore. But a lot of that is not fully activated, so that's why I do kind of sweep up whatever's liquid and hope that it'll help get my stuff black. And I turn my project over a few times and just try to get it completely filled in. So I usually do this, make sure it looks pretty well coated, and then I'll let it sit for a little while, maybe like 15 minutes or so, in case it wants to soak in or do more, whatever it wants to do. And then I take it into the bathroom and rinse it away. I like to use cold water. I use hot water when I'm scrubbing to get it clean, and I use cold water after the patina is on. And this is what it looks like. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I hope this inspires you. Thank you.